We're back. Whew, that was rough. Screencastify down. All right, we're getting back into graphing sine and cosine today. Amplitude, if you remember, is how far it is from the center to the maximum or minimum point. So that will be the absolute value of A. And remember, A is in front of the sine or cosine. Now the period is calculated using the B, which is between the sine and the x, or the cosine and the x. So period is always 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B. And for us, B is pretty much always going to be positive anyway. All right, so find the amplitude and period of the graph of the function and write the equation. So if you look, amplitude, it maxes out at 3 and -3, so our amplitude will be 3. Now if we're calculating the period, if we see, we can do, period is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B. And if you look where this repeats, it does one complete cycle at pi, because here's 2 pi over here. So it completes one cycle in pi. So our period would be pi. Now to calculate what B would equal, we would have to do the period, pi, equals 2 pi over B. Now, I'll show you a little shortcut here in a second, but really what we have to do initially is multiply both sides by B. So that would be B times pi equals 2 pi. And then we would divide that by by pi. Pi's cancel out, and B equals 2. So that's fine. That's one way to calculate B. I want to save us a couple steps here. You can always just, if you have a denominator over here, you can flip-flop it with whatever's over here. So you could go straight to B equals 2 pi over pi. And it goes back to how you solve a proportion, where it's like pi over 1 equals 2 pi over B. The cross products are interchangeable there. So you can always flip-flop the denominator, what's on the other side of the equal sign. So if we are dropping this in, now this one starts in the center, just like sine. Sine starts in the center. So we would say y equals, our amplitude is 3 sine, and then it's bx, and our b was 2. So 3 sine 2x. That's what we're going to be doing today. So remember, sine always starts in the center, goes up, then swoops down and back to center. Cosine starts at the top, then dips, and then comes back to the top. So if you look here, again, it starts in the center, goes up, down, back to center. So it's going to be something sine x. We just need to figure out what a and b are. So this one maxes out at 2, so our amplitude is 2. Goes up 2 and down 2 from the center. So it's going to be 2 sine of x. Now this one, if you look, starts repeating at 4 pi. The period is 4 pi. So if we are calculating, remember, period equals 2 pi over b. So our period is 4 pi. So 4 pi equals 2 pi over b. If you just flip-flop the b and the 4 pi, 2 pi over 4 pi. Pi's cancel, and then 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2. So that is our b. 2 sine 1/2 x. So figuring out the a is pretty easy. You just count the amplitude, how far above and below it goes from the center. And then the b is a little bit tougher to calculate. So number 3. Now if you look at number 3, at 0, it's starting at the absolute top. That is when we're doing cosine. So we're going to say y equals something cosine something x. All right, so it dips down and then it comes back to starting position at 2 pi. So our period is going to be 2 pi. Let me write that in a different color here. Now for calculating the amplitude, if you look from the center, it goes up to 4 and it goes down to -4. So that means it's 4 away from the center. So our amplitude is 4, which is our A, right? The only thing that would change that, well, we'll get there when we get there. And then we're going to calculate the B, because we need to figure out what goes between cosine and x. So again, period equals 2 pi over b. Our period is 2 pi. So 2 pi equals 2 pi over b. Flip flop, we end up with b equals 2 pi over 2 pi. And 2 pi divided by 2 pi is 1. So b equals 1, you don't need to write the 1 there. It's like there's an invisible 1. So you just say y equals 4 cosine x. All right. Ooh, fun. So here I see it repeats with a period of 2 pi. Amplitude, it goes up 5 and down 5. Now, it's starting at the max or min. It's not starting in the center. So we're going to use cosine. But remember, cosine typically starts at the tippy top. This one starts at the bottom, which means it's reflected. So our amplitude is 5, but with a reflection, we're going to keep that in as -5 for A. And then we have to calculate if there's a B besides 1. So if we do the period, 2 pi equals 2 pi divided by B, flip-flop, B equals 2 pi over 2 pi. So B comes out to 1, so you don't need to write that. You could write 1x, but why would you? You should just write y equals -5 cosine x. Cool. Now we're going to actually graph them. This could get a little tougher, but we've got all the steps in there. So look at the important numbers they gave us. It's sine. Remember, sine starts in the middle, goes to the top, back to middle, goes to the lowest point, and back to middle. So if you think about it, our graph kind of gets divided into 4 chunks for one cycle. So there's a part where it's going up, then it's back to the center, then it goes down to its lowest, and then it goes back to center. Now, 6 is the amplitude, so at most it's going to go up 6, and it's going to go down 6. If you look, we only have 5 lines here, so let's just go by 2. So let's say 2, 4, 6, -2, -4, -6. So we can kind of figure out what our graph is going to look like. It's going to look like this. We're going to have 4 spots in our one cycle here. And we only have to graph one cycle. Typically, I'm going to have you guys graph 2 cycles. So you could graph one to the right of 0 and one to the left, and that would be 2 cycles. But we're going to figure out what one full period would be. And remember, period is, oh, by the way, we already know the graph, again, because it starts in the middle. At the next point, it goes to its absolute maximum. It goes back to the middle. It goes to its lowest point, and then it goes back to the middle. Here's what the graph will look like. But we're not done because the labels are very important. That's what's going to distinguish the different graphs. So we need to figure out the labels. So we're going to take one period, and remember, period equals 2 pi divided by b. And if you look, there's nothing between sine and x. So we're doing 2 pi divided by 1, which is 2 pi. So one full period for us is going to be 2 pi. But we're breaking it into 4 chunks. So immediately what I do is I figure out what I'm going to have to increase the markings by. So I take this and I divide it by 4, or I multiply it by 1/4. 1/4 times 2 pi, which this would simplify to 2 pi over 4, which comes out to pi over 2. So each marking is going to be an additional pi over 2. So here would be 1 pi over 2. Here would be 2 pi over 2, which simplifies just to pi. Here would be 3 pi over 2, and here would be 4 pi over 2, which simplifies to 2 pi. So You know the shape of it. You know how it's going to go. Sine always starts middle, upper, middle, lower, middle. Okay? And then we just need to figure out the labels. So let's try another one. Y equals sine of 4x. So again, we know what most of this graph looks like. It's got an amplitude of 1, right? There's an A of 1. So at most, it's going to go up 1 and down 1. We don't know the period yet. 1, 2, 3, 4. But we know that it is sine. So sine starts in the middle, maximum, middle, lower, middle. This is one cycle. We do need to figure out the labels though. So period is 2 pi divided by b. In our case, b is 4. Now 2/4 reduces to 1/2. So one full period is going to be pi over 2. But we need to figure out our 4 labels here. So we're going to take 1/4 times pi over 2. So we are going to mark it every pi over 8. So each one of these markings is going to increase by 1 pi over 8. So here's 1 pi over 8. The second one would be 2 pi over 8. The 2/8 reduces to 1/4. So we're going to label it with a reduced fraction. So pi over 4. So 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, you can simplify. And then this would be 4 pi over 8, which simplifies to 1/2. So pi over 2, which is great because that's one full period, pi over 2. This could continue on forever in both directions. You're just increasing each time by pi over 8. So this was 4 pi over 8, then it'd be 5 pi over 8. And 6 pi over 8 would reduce to 3 pi over 4. Then you'd have 7 pi over 8. Then you'd have 8 pi over 8, which is one full pi. So if this graph continued, we went center, high, center, low, center, high, center, low, center. So here would be a second cycle of our graph. You see the same patterns. It's just a matter of getting the labels correct. We're going to do 7 and 8, and then the rest of this you're going to complete as homework. So I see the amplitude is 5. So our maximum will be 5. Our minimum will be -5. There's going to be 4 little markings here, which we'll figure those out in a minute. But this one's different because it's cosine. So remember, cosine doesn't start at the center. It starts at the absolute maximum point. So it goes maximum, center, minimum, center, maximum. So it looks kind of like a curvy letter V. Again, now we just need to figure out the labels here. So we need to figure out the period is 2 pi over b, and b for us is just 1. So the period is going to be 2 pi, but we need that broken into 4 chunks. So we can just do 1/4 times 2 pi, which you see this a lot. Comes out to 2 pi over 4, which reduces to pi over 2. So each label will be 1 pi over 2 to increase. So here will be 1 pi over 2. The next one would be 2 pi over 2, which reduces to 1 pi. Then we would have 3 pi over 2, and then we would have 4 pi over 2, and that would come out to 2 pi. So again, our period, or our cycle, is 2 pi, and this gives you one cycle from 0 to 2 pi. If it was to continue, it would just keep going like this. Here we go. Here we go. Number 8, the last one. Yes, 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 yes. All right, it's cosine again. The amplitude is A, right? A is 1, so it's going to go up 1 and down 1 from the center. There's going to be 4 little labels here. It's cosine, which starts at the top, then goes middle, lowest, middle, top. We've got the cycle graphed, we just need the labels. So the period is 2 pi divided by b, and our b in this case is 4. So this comes out to 1/2, right? Pi over 2. to figure out our labels. So that would be the full cycle. Our last thing here will be pi over 2. To me, the easiest way to figure out those markings is just find a fourth of this. 1/4 times pi over 2 across the top, across the bottom. So each marking will be an additional pi over 8. So this is 1 pi over 8. This is 2 pi over 8, which reduces to pi over 4. This would be 3 pi over 8. And this would be 4 pi over 8, and 4 over 8 reduces to 1/2, so you get that pi over 2 there. Done! It's not too terrible, right? Eventually we'll throw in some shifts, like some right and left translations, maybe some up and down. I don't know. Might get a little wild.